Okay. Good evening, everybody. So this is the part of the famous Discovery Seminar called Transmission. Now, for those of you who have been following, the Discovery Seminar is a very unique experience where rational evidence is provided in many different ways to kind of demonstrate the authenticity of the Torah, of the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, meaning that we have very powerful evidence that the author of the Torah is Hashem, is God. And you know, they say if Bill Gates tells you how to use a computer, he knows what he's talking about. So life, which is very, very complex and very complicated, Hashem gave us a Torah, which is really the instructions for living. And what Discovery addresses is what evidence do we have for the authenticity of the Torah? And it's very appropriate now to discuss I apologize. We're having a little technical difficulty. One second, I apologize. Okay, I hope that I'm being heard. Okay, so it's very appropriate that now during Sfiras HaOmer, during the period that we count down or count up to Shavuot, to Shavuos, where the giving of the Torah took place, very appropriate to talk about this. And we're going to talk about the transmission process. This Torah that we were given by Hashem, how was it transmitted? It was 3,300 years ago. How was it transmitted through the generations to now, to this day and age, where we could be confident that it came from Hashem, and that it's the same Torah that was given 3,300 years ago? So I'd like to start with a story that begins in Princeton University. And this took place about 20 years ago, where I was invited to speak in Princeton University. And what was taking place there? A course was being given called Comparative Religion. And I'd like to give you the details. There was a professor who had 50 students. And what they did is they did research on 5 religions, compared them, and then had a final. So the details are the professor was a non-Jewish man. He had 2 PhDs in philosophy, and he decided at the end of the semester, instead of having a review, he decided to invite a representative of each of the 5 religions that he was comparing, that the course was describing. What were the 5 religions? Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hare Krishna, and the Mormons. Those were the 5 religions. So at the end of the semester, he decided, and he had these 50 students, that he was going to invite a representative. So he invited in a Muslim and someone following the Hare Krishnas, and a Mormon and a Christian. And when it came to the Jews, he was having difficulty. So he went over to one of the students, the only Jewish kid in the room, a 19-year-old boy named Stephen. And he asked him, do me a favor, get for me a rabbi who knows how to talk and how to explain the religion. So this boy, Stephen, had a father named Joel, and Joel was a very, very wealthy man who had made a significant donation to my organization. And I get a call from Joel right before Shabbat, right before Shabbos. And he tells me, he calls me from his, his yacht, from a satellite phone on his yacht in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And he says to me, "You're going to Princeton to teach some Torah." Now, I was not interested really in doing this, but this is my good friend and supporter. So I went. And it was on an Erev Shabbos. I remember, you see, the Muslims came Monday, the Christians came Tuesday, the Harrys were Wednesday, the Mormons were Thursday, and I came Erev Shabbos. I was supposed to speak for 65 minutes, but in the end, they kept me there for well over 2 hours. And I started to speak, and they were very hostile. They had already sat through a whole week. Most of these kids were really atheists and really didn't believe in anything, in any of these religions, and they were hostile. And I asked them the following question. I said, all the religions that were here this week, how did they begin? Who was there at their founding moment? Right? Every religion starts at some point. April 2nd at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the prophet comes down and says, "Hello, the Lord spoke to me. I'm the Messiah," whatever they claim. So I asked them, how did they all begin? And they start laughing. Yeah, they all began when one guy came along, claimed that God spoke to him, claimed that God took him up to heaven, claimed that God gave him a book. And it's all nonsense. It's all one person. And they all cancel each other out. This is what they were saying to me. So at this point, I could have said to them, and what about Judaism? How did Judaism start? But I said it a little differently. I said, what did the professor teach you about the beginning of Judaism? Why did I say it that way? Because I was pretty sure that they were going to give me the wrong answer. And when they give me the wrong answer, I could look at the professor and go, "Hey, what's going on here? These kids are paying a lot of money for tuition." So I asked, what did the professor teach you about the beginning of Judaism? So a very intelligent girl raised her hand. It was clear that she was either from China or Japan, and she raised her hand and she says, "Well, the professor taught us that the Jewish people, the way they got their Bible was God gave it to Moses. Just like all the other religions. God gave it to Moses." So I looked at her and I looked at them and I was prepared. I had an overhead projector and I had a large screen and I had these slides. And on each slide I had a pasuk from the Torah, a verse with the English translation. And all I did for the next 7-8 minutes was read to them different verses in the Torah, and I let them reach their own conclusion. So, for example, I read to them, so the professor, mentioned to you and taught you that Judaism is just like all the other religions. In fact, there have been 15,000 recorded religions since Abraham. And what they were taught is that all 15,000 began the same way, where God gave it to one person. And the Jews, it was Moses. So I read to them, it says in the Torah, in Hebrew, Ki bayom hashlishi, on the third day when they reached Mount Sinai after leaving Egypt and traveling through the desert, Yered Hashem, God came down, le'ene, in front of Kol ha'am al har Sinai, in front of the entire nation. It doesn't say in front of Moses. You see, by Islam, it says in front of Muhammad. And by the Christians, it's in front of Jesus. And the Mormons, it's in front of Joseph Smith, one person. But by the Jews, it says God appeared to the entire nation. And then in the next verse, it says, Vayecherad kol ha'am, The entire nation was shaking. The next verse says, Vayotze Moshe es ha'am. Moshe took the entire nation, likras Elokim, to meet Hashem. And I showed them 40 different examples throughout the Torah, where it's God who appeared to the entire nation. Now, how many people was that? So the Torah tells us that there were 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60. They didn't have a shidduch crisis in that day. They didn't have difficulty getting married. So I'm assuming there was 1.2 million young married couples between the ages of 20 and 60. The 1.2 million all had children, 4, 5, 6 beautiful children, obviously not as beautiful as mine, but not bad. And then you take all the grandparents, the bubbies, the zadies above the age of 60, you put it together, it's approximately 3 million, approximately. So I showed this group of kids in Princeton, 14,999 religions who all came after Judaism. And they all knew about our claim in the Torah that God appeared to the entire nation, a national revelation. They all began with one person. Or, maybe a few began with a few people, but it was 1 or 2 people. But the overwhelming majority was one person, private. We, on the other hand, are categorically different and utterly unique. 3 million people experience God talking to them, communicating with them, giving them the Torah, appearing before them in a way that obviously we cannot understand. We weren't there. I will never forget what happened. This young lady, very intelligent girl, says, whoa, Rabbi, wait a minute. Are you saying that God appeared? The Jewish people believe that God appeared to a bunch of people, unlike every single religion in the world, a whole group, a whole bunch of people? So I looked at her and I said, well, I wouldn't say a bunch. I would say 3 million men, women, and children who happened to be my grandparents, and they passed it down to me through a Passover Seder. And then I repeated that statement. And the room was silent. I didn't look at the professor anymore. I figured, I don't know, he may have been turning many colors because he taught them that God gave it to Moses. When in reality, all over the Torah, it's 3 million people. Here's another verse. The entire nation heard the sounds and the shofar. Here's another verse. And God said to Moshe, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Ko tomar el b'nei Yisrael, tell the Jews, Atem risem, you saw, Ki min hashamayim dibarti machem, that I spoke to you, the entire nation. I will never forget what happened at this moment. This young lady, she stands up and says, Rabbi, does the world know about this? She understood that this is the most unique, incredible claim in history. A claim of national revelation that God appeared to millions of people. Now, you can ask, so what? Big deal. What's the difference between one person telling you, here's what happened to me, and 3 million people saying, here's what happened to us? The difference is the first case, where it's one person, or 2 people, or 5 people, it's what's called a suffix. It's unverifiable. They could have made up the story. You have no way to verify, by definition, whether or not it's true. 3 million people, 10,000 people, 1 million, 3 million is vadai, is for sure. It definitely took place. That is the difference. And that is why our claim, the Jewish people's claim, the Torah's claim, is utterly unique. We are the only nation in history to claim that God appeared to an entire nation and communicated to them the truth how they should live their lives. What's correct, what's right, what's wrong. All other religions are by definition unverifiable. And therefore, Judaism is not a religion. We are what's called in Hebrew a Masorah, which really means an historical event. A religion is based on faith. It's a function of your emotions, your desire to connect yourself to this prophet, this claimed prophet, etc. But you have no way to verify. All the major religions, they have no way to verify the basic tenets of their faith. Judaism, on the other hand, is an historical event, not a religion, just like any other historical event. I am 100% sure that there was a civil war in America. I am 100% sure, we all are, that there was a man named Abraham Lincoln who was the president of the United States. How could we be sure? And I would bet every penny that I own, I'd bet $100 million. I'd bet anything. How could that be? I wasn't there. There are no witnesses alive today. There's no videos. There's no pictures of real pictures of George Washington. The way we know these things are true is because any historical event is because the amount of people who are claimed to have witnessed it is so large that conspiracy is impossible. How do I know there was a man named Abraham Lincoln who was the president of the United States? Because at the time that he existed, or was claimed to have existed, at that time, millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people said, we saw him, we heard his speech. And they went home and they told their children, they passed it down. Same thing with the Civil War. Same thing with anything in history. And that is the definition of history. When the event is claimed to have happened to so many people that conspiracy is impossible. And therefore, Judaism is not a religion. We are an historical event. Now, how was that historical event passed down? There are many ways. We could talk about it for hours. But I want to share with you something. See, we have something, what Hashem did on Har Sinai. It's as if he took a rope and he cast that rope across 3,300 years of history. And every Jew is holding on to that rope from Mount Sinai till today. How? It's called the Pesach Seder, the Passover Seder, the most fundamental point of education in the Jewish people. How many Passover Sederim have taken place in your family? Everyone who's watching here, right? In your family, how many Passover Seders have taken place between your family and Moshe Rabbeinu and Mount Sinai and the Jews leaving Egypt? Are you ready? Approximately 40. That's it. See, many people have difficulty connecting to an event that happened 3,300 years ago. I don't even remember what I did with my children on Chol HaMoed and my grandchildren last year. Did I torture myself and go to the aquarium? Or did I torture myself and go to the Bronx Zoo? I don't remember. So how are we supposed to connect to an event that happened 3,300 years ago? So Hashem gave us many ways. From the Sukkah, the Mezuzah, Kiddush, many ways. But the main way is the Passover Seder. And there were only approximately 40 of them. How do I get 40? Because we're talking generations. See, when I was 4 years old, in 1964, you could all do the math, how old I am. So when I was 4 years old in 1964, I was at a Passover Seder in Long Island, where I grew up, with my parents, my brothers, and my Zaidi, my grandfather, my Zaidi. He was 91 years old. It was his last Passover Seder with us because he passed away that year. I was 4, he was 91. And during the time when I was trying to steal the afikomen and all the adults were outside the room, I was left alone with my Zaidi. And here's exactly what happened without any, drama or change of the facts. I was 4, and my Zaidi walked over to me in 1964, and he was 91. He grabbed a hold of my wrist, my right hand, and he said to me in Yiddish the following words: Daniel, don't ever forget, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God took us out of Mitzrayim, took us out of Egypt, and with a big smile he said, and he gave us a beautiful Torah. And then my Zaidi leaned down, lowered his voice, and with a big smile he said to me, and when I was 4 years old and 18, whatever it was, 78, my 90-year-old Zaidi from 1793 did the same thing to me that I'm doing to you. 2 Zaidis, 2 Siddharim, mechanics in 1792. And when that Zaidi was 4 years old in 1705, his Zaidi from 1610 did the same thing to him. 3 of my Zaidis. And I'm in 1610. Just take it back. It's about 40, 41, which is really nothing. And this is how we passed on this event, this historical event that the Jewish people experienced. Now, I would like to continue. So there I was in Princeton, and I presented this, and I showed them the verses. And we are utterly unique. So one of the kids raised his hand, and he asked me, Rabbi, this is very, very interesting what you're saying. They never heard this, of our claim of national revelation. But Rabbi, there are 2 billion Muslims and 1 billion Christians and millions and tens of millions of other religions who believe 100% in their religion. How many Jews are there that really believe? He asked me. So whatever, 15 million, 12 million, 10 million. He said, game over, they win. There's billions of them. And not only are there billions of people who believe in other religions, who believe in their one-man story without a mass revelation, but many of them are very smart. There are hundreds of millions of very, very smart Christians and Muslims and Mormons and etc. I was asked this question. So here's what I answered. I said like this. I said, first of all, the fact that billions of people believe in a religion is really meaningless in terms of authenticating that religion. And you know why? Because they're all mutually exclusive. 1 billion Muslims believe that they have the truth, and they're convinced of it, and that the Christians do not have the truth. And 1 billion Christians believe that their prophet's the greatest prophet, and Muhammad is not the greatest prophet. That's what they believe. Can they both be accurate and correct at the same time? It would seem, I said to them, that we have a mutually exclusive claims. Either Muhammad was the greatest prophet of all time, or Jesus was, or Joseph Smith, or whoever. Each one's claiming they were the greatest prophet of all time. So what do we see from this? They can't all be the greatest prophet. So we see from this, it's really irrefutable logic that billions of people could believe a certain story took place a long time ago. A God appeared to their prophet, and it cannot be accurate because we have other claims that are mutually exclusive claims. And therefore, it doesn't matter. This is the most important point that's written in many of the Svarim, and many of the rabbis have written about this for the last 1,000 years. It doesn't matter how many people believe in a religion and believe in a story. Rather, it's how many people witness the story. The first believers, when the religion started, who was there? How many people experienced it? Was it one and therefore unverifiable? Or was it 3 million historical event? Doesn't matter how many people believe in a story, it's how many people witnessed it. And we, the Jewish people in our Torah, are an historical document. 3 million people. I shared with them, and then I shared with them the following mashal, the following story. Imagine you're in a forest. So they're asking, so how could it be that all these people, billions of people, are believing in these one-man unverifiable stories? And the answer is the following. Imagine you're in a forest, and there are bears running after you. Thousands, hundreds, thousands of people are trying to get out of this forest because there's a pack of 30 grizzly bears running after them. And you come to a fork in the road. Which way do you go? Right or left? One road's going to lead you out of the forest. One road's going to lead you deeper into the forest, and you will not make it out alive. So you look to the right, you see 5,000 people went to the right. You look to the left, only 5 people. The bears are about 30 seconds away. You need to make a decision right now. The problem is you don't know which one's the correct one, the right or the left. All you know is 5,000 went to the right, 5 went to the left. So logic dictates you go with the 5,000. It's 5,000 people made a decision. There it's only 5. So the great rabbi who wrote about this story says, as you're about to take the road of the 5,000, you suddenly realize, who are these 5,000 people? There's a special school next door to the forest for people who are nebuch, unfortunately blind. And all of them, they went on a picnic. They went on an outing in the forest. So 4,999 of those people are nebuch blind, and they're holding hands because the first person, the teacher, had yelled out, there are bears in the forest, grab hands, we're getting out of here. So what are the numbers now? Is it still 5 to 5,000? No, it's 5 to 1. One person made the decision to go to the right, and he schlepped along the other 4,999. They're just followers. And therefore you turn around and you take the road to the left. And I believe all the religions in the world, they all went to the right. They're followers. So when it comes to Muslims and Christians and Mormons and all the different religions, each person's following their father. Okay. And that father's following their father and their father. Go all the way back to the beginning. You come to one person. So it's not billions of people. It's one person that started it all off. And that's unverifiable. But by Jews, it's not Moses who went to the left and brought the 3 million people after him. It's 3 million of our grandparents went to the left, followed by 4 Passover Seder, and then there's millions of Jews today. So we are millions of people following our father, back to the beginning, which is 3 million people, an historical event. All the others go back to one person. They're simply followers. They're followers. Because it's all about witnesses. Now, I remember once I was coming back from a discovery seminar in California. It happens to be some famous Hollywood stars. We were presenting, Jewish ones, we were presenting the seminar to them. And on my way back, we were supposed to go to New York through Denver, but there was a snowstorm in Denver. Supposed to be a layover in Denver, and we were redirected to Salt Lake City. So there I was, this is many years ago, no cell phones, stuck in Salt Lake City in an airport for 7 hours. till the next plane to New York. And I remember seeing to my right, were a group of Chabad, Lubavitch young men, holy men, doing wonderful mitzvahs and helping Jews do mitzvahs. That was to my right. To my left were a group of Mormons, really a couple, a boy and a girl, young man, young lady, giving out Mormon literature. So I made a cheshbon. I figured, I already prayed today. I already davened. So I'll go with the Mormons. So I started talking to these Mormons. Very nice people. And they believe very strongly in their religion. And I brought up what I've been told you until now. And I showed them it makes so much sense. How would God do this? Would he go to one person or 3 million? And I explained to them, I asked them simple questions, they claim Moses was a great prophet and the Torah was true, but then God kind of changed his mind, redirected things, and now there's a new way to serve him through Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon. And many other religions say that too. That's what they all say. So I pointed out to them, you believe in the 5 books of Moses, right? Yeah. And it says in the book 24 times, Brit Olam, Bris Olam, that God's relationship with the Jews and the Torah is a covenant forever. It's forever. I also pointed out to them that, they believe in the story of Mount Sinai, a national revelation. So I asked them, if Hashem came back and decided that there's a new way to, have a relationship with him, why wouldn't he gather millions of people from this new way on a mountain and tell them? Do a mass revelation like you did for the Jews. And my biggest question of all I asked them is, if God changed his mind, why didn't he come back to the Jews and tell us? Why did he do a second Mount Sinai revelation and inform us that the rules are changing? And now there's a new way and a better way to have a relationship with him. These are some of the things I brought up to them. And I want to point out that there is a verse in the Torah, and it's at the end of Moses' life, Moshe Rabbeinu's life. And he points out, it's in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, the 4th parak, verse 32, Pasuk Lamed Beis. And it says there, Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the Jews then, and if you look at the context, he's really telling any Jew at any point in history. And he says in the verse in the Torah, take a look back in history, look on any area of this world or at any time in history. Has anyone ever made this claim of national revelation? Have you ever even heard of such a claim? What the author of the Torah is telling us is nobody in history will ever make the claim that God spoke to an entire nation. So I ask, if the author of the Torah was a man, number one, he got it right. He was a prophet. Here we are 3,300 years later, 15,000 religions later, and nobody dared to even try to convince people that there was a national revelation for their religion. So he was a prophet. Number two, if a man wrote the Torah, that means he himself got away with a hoax of claiming that it was from God. How could he then write in the Torah that no one will ever try this? He just did it. So these are all powerful pieces of evidence that the Torah was given as an historical event that took place on Mount Sinai 3,330 years ago. And Hashem passed it down through our Passover Seder and many, many other ways. Now, I want to bring up the idea, we're talking about transmission, of the oral law. And really, this needs to be addressed perhaps in a separate class, but we'll do it now quickly. How do we know? That's the written Torah. How do we know there was an oral Torah? The whole Talmud and all the rabbis, so to say, thousands of years of what some people call rabbinical Judaism, which is really not accurate at all. How do we know there was an oral explanation? Maybe God on Mount Sinai, for example, said, go keep Shabbat, and don't do milacha, don't do work. What it means is, chill. If you feel sitting at the beach on Shabbat and drinking a martini and smoking a cigar and just chilling, that's what Hashem, God, meant, then that's what he meant. It's subject to interpretation. But that is impossible. Of course, there had to have been an oral tradition and an oral Torah, an oral law. I was once on a plane going to Israel, and I sat down next to a very wonderful Israeli soldier. I thanked him for, all that he does for the Jewish people. And, after a while, I pulled out, a Chumash, a Torah, and I was learning. I was studying. And he started a conversation with me. And he says to me, this is really nonsense. He said, I got to be honest with you, this whole Torah thing. And as I began to talk to him more, I realized that his real problem wasn't so much the Torah, but, the oral law and the rabbis. So here's what I said to him. I said, let me ask you, the Torah was written by a very brilliant mind, correct? He goes, the most brilliant of all time, greatest, greatest book of all time, changed the world, formed the backbone of all Western morality. I said, so this person was brilliant. And I said, did this person, according to you who wrote the Torah, this being, did he want the Jews to keep the Torah, to keep the 613 commandments, or not? Obviously, the author of the Torah, boy, did he want us to keep it. There were different punishments, there were even death penalties, all very serious stuff. He wants us to keep the Torah. And then I said to this man, but without an oral law, is not one commandment whatsoever, not one out of the 613 that you can keep just based on the words of the Torah. And I gave him dozens of examples. I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses came down from Mount Sinai and told all the men, line up, go put on tefillin. That's all it says in the Torah, tefillin, phylacteries. What's that? The men would say, what's that, Moshe Rabbeinu? And Moshe would say, sorry, not telling. Guess. How could that be? How could you do an act of putting on tefillin where it doesn't say a single thing in the Torah, what is tefillin? Or another mitzvah, go put on tzitzit, go put on fringes, without any explanation of what it is. Honor your mother and your father. Someone once said to me, you don't need an oral law for that. Sure you do. What if you're adopted? Are you obligated to honor your father and mother? What if, God forbid, you're severely abused by them? Are you obligated to honor them? It says in the Torah, go live in a sukkah for a week. What's a sukkah? I have to go into something for a week. What is it? What does that mean, go there? Can I go to work? Does my entire family move in? Do I have to bring in my cars there? Washing machines, refrigerator? What does it mean? And I showed him commandment after commandment. Don't kill. What does that mean? What if someone's coming to kill you? What if a terrorist is about to kill you? You just let him? Love Hashem. It all says in the Torah, love God. What do you do? How do you do that? Send them cards, flowers. Like, how do you love God? You need an oral law to explain these things. Without an oral law, the Torah makes absolutely no sense. There's nothing you can do. All these commandments, you have no idea. And then we come to Shabbat. Imagine Moshe Rabbeinu comes down. Jews, I just received the most beautiful number one mitzvah in the world from Hashem. It's called Shabbos, Shabbat. Go keep the Shabbos. And the Jews would say, okay, how do we do that? And God says, don't do milacha. Not work. The word for work is avodah. Don't do milacha. Oh, and by the way, if you do milacha, serious consequences. The Jews will all say, okay, what is milacha? What is it that we're not supposed to do? And Moshe Rabbeinu says, not telling, guess. How could that be? No explanation whatsoever. What is melacha? What can't you do? What you can do on Shabbat? Or on Yom Kippur? It doesn't say you can't eat. It says, afflict your soul. That's the way it says it in Hebrew. Cause yourself pain. Afflict your soul. What does that mean? Take a hammer and hit yourself in the head? So Moshe Rabbeinu said, oh, you have to afflict your soul on Yom Kippur. And if you don't afflict yourself properly, severe punishments. And the Jews will say, okay, so what? What does it mean? What do you mean afflict my soul? And Moshe is not telling. How can that be? Of course there was an oral law. And of course there was an explanation. And then I'll conclude with you the question that people ask, how do we know that the Torah that we have today is the same Torah from thousands of years ago? How do we know that the oral law didn't change? The telephone game. So there's much to say on this, but I will say this. When the state of Israel was proclaimed in 1948, millions of Jews arrived in Israel from all over the world and many different cultures, from the north, from the south, Sephardim, Ashkenazim, Teimanim, from Iran, from Iraq, from Belgium, from France, from America, from all over the world. And you know what happened at that first Yom Kippur? How did everybody afflict themselves? Every single one fasted, like the oral law says, even though it doesn't say it in the Torah explicitly. And when it said on Sukkot to take out a beautiful fruit, everyone took out an esrog. They may have had different customs, big ones, small ones, yellow, green, but they were all an esrog. No one pulled out a banana or a watermelon or a cantaloupe. They recognized that they all had the same Torah Shebaal Peh, the same oral law. And so too with the Torah. In the early 1950s, Dr. Breuer, famous professor Dr. Breuer, he did a study on thousands of Torahs that were brought to Israel from every different culture. Some of them 1,000 years old, 800 years old, 600 years old. And he compared all these Torahs. And they all had 304,805 letters. They were the same Torah. There was a slight difference between the Sephardi Torah and the Ashkenazi of 8 letters. And the Teimani was 9 letters, but these were spelling variants. Like the word honor, they spelled Honor or they added U. But no different words or phrases. So we saw that the Torahs had remained intact. So I want to conclude this part of the discovery, the transmission process, how God gave us the Torah on Mount Sinai, did it in a way that we don't have to have faith. It's real powerful evidence of an historical event passed down through the Passover Seder, the mezuzahs in our Torah, the Shema that we say, the Kriya Shema, the Kiddush, so many other commandments and mitzvot that Hashem gave us so that we could perpetuate this historical event. And we have a Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral law that explains everything in the Torah and how to do the 613 commandments. And I want to leave off with you a very powerful question that I've had for maybe 40 years. And it's appropriate to ask it now. And that question is, the foundation of Judaism is Har Sinai, is the giving of the Torah on Har Sinai. When did that happen? Which holiday? Shavuot. Yet, we don't have a single mitzvah in the Torah surrounding the mitzvah, the holiday of Shavuot. But Passover, we have the Passover Seder and so many commandments. Why don't we have a Passover Seder for Shavuot, for Shavuos, when we sit around and we discuss what happened on Mount Sinai and the giving of the Torah, etc.? Many, many answers have been given. Some of them satisfy me a little bit, some more. You tell me if you have an answer, a really good answer to this question. You can somehow track me down and send me that answer. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for listening to the first parts of Discovery, and now comes, I think it's going to be on Wednesday night, the Control, I think by Rabbi Solomon, I'm not 100% sure, but where, the culmination of all of this evidence that we have to show the authenticity and the truth of the Torah. Thank you, and good night.